What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another interview edition of Learns Crypto. My name is Nick Hellman, and today we have a special guest. He is the co-founder of Ethereum. He is the founder of ADA and the CEO of IOHK. That is Charles Hoskinson. How are you doing today, Charles?
I'm doing great. I'm here in warm, sunny Vietnam. We're having a great time. Excuse me. Okay, I was drinking some tea and I inhaled some, so it went down the wrong pipe. So I'm in warm, sunny Vietnam right now. It's raining every day. It's quite humid, but it's a lovely country, lovely place. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So I guess just to start, I mean, I kind of gave you a proper introduction. I'm sure so many people know who you are, so I'm not going to ask for a brief background on yourself. But really, I just want to know if you can give a general overview of ADA, and then really I want to hear some of the most exciting things you have coming soon for Cardano and ADA. I know you did do a brief update on Twitter recently, so maybe some people have heard this, but I know a lot of people in the community have not.
Okay, yeah. So if you look at cryptocurrencies, the easiest way of explaining ADA is that it's just a natural continuation of things that I did when I was in Ethereum and things that we did at Ethereum that Satoshi had started with Bitcoin. So if you think in terms of generations, it's easiest to get what's going on. So Bitcoin was the first generation, and the problems that Satoshi was trying to solve were pretty simple, but they were hard to solve. First was this idea of digital scarcity, and second, this idea that if you had it, you could actually achieve real value. So digital scarcity is kind of a weird concept. It's not something we've encountered before. Like if you have an MP3 or a video file or something, and somebody wants to get the latest episode of Game of Thrones, you just click copy, and there you go, they get one. So digital artifacts are not scarce at all. In fact, they're the opposite. So by using a blockchain and proof of work, and this whole decentralized architecture, Satoshi was able to create this trustless, decentralized currency that was scarce. So that was for the huge accomplishment. But then it was still an open question of whether that would actually achieve market value or not. So it took a few years, and right around 2013, it went from nothing to about $1 billion. And a lot of companies came in. We saw a lot of VC interest, and people said, okay, Bitcoin's here to stay. The problem is Bitcoin is blind, deaf, and dumb. It doesn't really know what's going on. You can't do much with it. So with Ethereum, what we wanted to do was to make transactions programmable, kind of like when JavaScript came to the web browser. We went from these static websites, which may have some cool graphics on them and some text, but that's pretty much it, to websites that are like YouTube and Facebook. They're highly interactive. You can actually do things. They have behaviors. So that's the second generation. It was this whole idea of the smart contract, embedding the terms and conditions into the transaction itself. And that's a great idea. It turned out that people really liked it, and Ethereum grew by leaps and bounds. Now we're entering into the third generation, where it's no longer sufficient to have scarcity and decentralization and market value and smart contracts. These things got to work at scale. So you have to be able to make them work from not just a few thousand users, but eventually millions, eventually billions of users.
Mm-hmm.
That requires completely different protocols and approaches. Second, there's 1,500 cryptocurrencies commonly used. There's probably more that have been abandoned, and they don't talk to each other. They're not interoperable with each other. So that's a big issue, and it's something that we have to work our way through. Second, we have to figure out how to talk to the legacy system, because apparently people still have credit cards and bank accounts. Go figure. And as long as PayPal and credit cards and bank accounts are around, we need to do something about it. So interoperability is a big challenge. And then third, there's this who pays and who decides, the sustainability side of the ecosystem. On the who pays side of things, we have things like ICOs, and that's so 2017. The big thing that's coming is STOs, security token offerings, but basically the same thing. Pool a bunch of money to a group of people to go do something. Let's say they're great people and they do a good job. The problem is that the money runs out at some point, because there isn't a revenue model usually associated with an ICO. So then beyond that, well, who's going to pay for maintain the protocol, upgrade the protocol? We have this thing called the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. So if you just let somebody else decide and pay for it, it's somehow, I don't think you're going to have a very decentralized ecosystem. And second, you have this who decides. If you look at things like Ethereum Classic or Bitcoin Cash, these are mainly governance failures, where people just couldn't get along, couldn't decide, and so they forked the cryptocurrency, and as a result, now we have divergent ecosystems. And we can't really go around and say, hey, this is the world's next money. Oh, by the way, on Tuesday, you're going to have 5 new versions of it that are all airdropped, because we couldn't decide on a block size. Yeah. So we've got a big governance, the who decides. How do you upgrade the system? So collectively, these three problems are kind of the last mile that's preventing cryptocurrencies from growing from where they are to something that millions to billions of people are going to use. And these things are going to be useful, self-evolving, self-healing, and capable of working with platforms and services that we like. So I term that to be the third generation. Everybody has a particular opinion about it. So guys like EOS and IOTA, they're really focused on scalability. So they really want to push up the TPS rate, try to get as many users as possible. Guys like Ripple and Aeon are really focused on interoperability. Ripple even has, I think, a 300-person committee at the W3C for a protocol called Interledger. And guys like Tezos and Dash are really focused on the governance side with their treasury model and their blockchain forking protocols. And Cardano is trying to cover all three areas. So we started in 2015. It was basically just a collection of concepts. We did about 3 years of research and development, and now we're in a position where we think we have a pretty good shot at being able to pull it off. So we launched the first version of the product in September of 2017. It was called Byron, and this is really like a proof of concept for a lot of the ideas that we had, and also a chance for us to see how bad we screwed up on a lot of design decisions, and get integrated with exchanges and have them yell at us and redo our APIs and these types of things. And we sure as hell did screw up in some areas. So we spent the last year cleaning things up and fixing things. And now we're exiting Byron, we're moving into Shelley, where we're taking the training wheels off and the system's going to get fully decentralized. Ouroboros has really matured. The heart of our system is a proof of stake based system. We've made a lot of good innovations there. Yeah, we're just wiring things on, wiring on side chains, wiring on smart contracts, these types of things. And that's going to be a lot of fun over the next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing more and more. I mean, obviously, you guys had the massive run-up in price action last year, as well as everything else during the bull market. But now, really, during this bear market, it allows people to do more research and really get to the grindstone and start creating more products. And I really see that coming out of Cardano, seeing that coming out of IOHK. I mean, the roadmap goes on and on, so I'm not going to sit here and talk about all these roadmap goals. But you kind of went over some of them right there. Now, I do notice that you guys have partnered up with a lot of coins, and you're on the board of advisors for a lot of projects, particularly with Ethereum Classic. I know you guys spent like 18 months rewriting that code or something like that. Why did you guys end up doing that? And I know that you're planning on having Ethereum Classic and ADA really talking together and being interoperable. Is that something coming soon, or is that something that's still ways away?
Yeah, so in terms of where Ethereum Classic came from, in many ways, a lot of people in the Ethereum Classic community view Ethereum Classic as Ethereum, and Ethereum as Ethereum Classic as the new coin.
Yep.
So here's what happened. I put my name, brand, and reputation on Ethereum, and I went my own way, but I still believed in this whole code is law, the philosophies of the system, and I felt that you can't go raise $18 million, market something one way, and then when it's inconvenient to you, go change the terms of sale without the consent of the customer. And not a lot of customers participated. I think the vote was less than 10% participation, and there wasn't a lot of time, and it was just a knee-jerk decision. And people said, well, Vitalik and everybody with the money is behind this, so I guess we just should go behind it. And I felt that it was important for the sake of choice to give people another option. So other people created Ethereum Classic, and I very quickly joined after that happened. And I said, all right, well, now that we have this thing, we got to do something with it. So I felt that we had to prove that we actually knew what we were doing. Because the reality was that we were using forked code, the parity client, the Geth client to maintain the ecosystem. And it's very easy to fork code. You just click a button.
Yeah.
So do you actually understand what's in the code? Do you understand how Ethereum works? And I felt the only way to demonstrate that would be to take a completely new language, Scala, and build a client from scratch. So copy nothing and write every line of code by hand. And that takes a hell of a long time, a lot of work, but we did it. We spent over 12 months building the first version and 6 months polishing it. Now we have a full node. You can mine with it. It can process smart contracts. It's basically, you could run the entire Ethereum Classic network. By the way, we've just added Ethereum support to it. So very soon you could run the entire Ethereum network with it as well. And to date, it's actually the most concise client constructed. It's only 12,000 lines of code. I think that's a quarter of the lines of code of Geth. It's fully security audited by Kudelski Security. It's got 84% test coverage. It was built with modern Scala practices. So it's probably the best client ever built for Ethereum. It's a lot of fun. Now, moving forward, we have to make some decisions about what are we going to do with Ethereum Classic, since we're decoupling ourselves completely from the Ethereum roadmap. Mm-hmm. So Ethereum Classic is not going to do proof of stake. It's not going to do plasma. It's not going to do a lot of the things that Vitalik is coming up with. So Likely, we're going to stay in the proof of work ecosystem, and we're going to try to make some innovations along proof of work. It turns out you can scale proof of work. Vitalik's ignored this, but a lot of good people thinking about how to scale Bitcoin have thought deeply about what they can do to make proof of work better. So we're going to explore those avenues. Second, it is important that we start adding interoperability to all ledgers, and Ethereum Classic is probably going to be one that's just small enough that we probably can get an interoperability play through without too much contention. So ETC Dev, one of the other development companies that works on Ethereum Classic, has been testing sidechains, and I think they just created a partnership with OpenStack to test that out. And we have our own sidechain protocol as well that's contingent on proof of work called non-interactive proofs of proof of work. And we're going to have a big summit in South Korea in September, and that summit will allow us to sit down and have a conversation about the 2019 roadmap. But it is one of my goals to try to make sure that Ethereum Classic is interoperable with Cardano. And since we now have a client, our own code base to work with, we can at least guarantee that on our side. And it's a matter of consensus to convince everybody else to go along with it. The nice part about Ethereum Classic is it's kind of like Ethereum-style smart contracts with Bitcoin-style governance. It's very decentralized. No one's in control. I can't raise my hand and say, hey, this is where we're going to go, like Vitalik can with Ethereum. I have to go and build consensus and get people to go along with that vision, which is a little slower. It can be more painful at times. But at the end of the day, I think that's ultimately the way to go, because it prevents cults of personality and prevents power structures from forming, which are exclusive and ultimately corrupt people.
Yeah, I tell people that all the time. I really think that Ethereum Classic is getting a little more in the spotlight now, obviously, because interoperability with Cardano has been in discussion. They are going to be added to Coinbase here shortly. And a lot of people are like, what is? They don't even know the story behind Ethereum Classic, that it really kind of is a true Ethereum, if you want to put it that way, if that's the easiest way.
Well,
and I just think it's really misunderstood.
You remember back in the 80s when they had New Coke? That's why we have Coca-Cola Classic.
There you go. There you go. So, I mean, you brought up the South Korea summit that's coming up. So talking about South Korea, I know Cardano has partnered up with MetApps, which is one of the largest South Korean systems for merchants. I think there's like 33,000 offline merchants that you guys, I think, are going to be accepted on. What is really the use case there? And do you think, I think this is a massive partnership that is going kind of under the radar since it kind of came out during a bear cycle. People really worried about cryptocurrencies, et cetera. But I think that is really big, and we all know that South Korea really supports and loves utilizing cryptocurrencies, and I think that's only going to grow.
Well, the best part about my job is I don't have to worry about these types of partnerships because there's an entity called Emergo that does all this stuff. So what people don't understand about Cardano usually is that it's not just one company behind it. There's actually 3 core companies. There's the Cardano Foundation, there's IOHK, and there's Emergo. So the Cardano Foundation is not-for-profit based in Switzerland, and they own the trademarks, and they do auditing and community management and these types of things. IOHK is a development company, so we build the protocol and do all the science and make sure that the product actually works. And then on the Emergo side, they're kind of like our version of Consensus. So their job is to go and make these partnerships with people in South Korea, Siren Labs, dozens of others. I think IronFX is another. And the purpose of those partnerships are to increase the liquidity of ADA, to increase the utility of ADA, and to improve the community experience as they use ADA. So in the case of this particular partnership, it's all about getting merchant adoption, which means there's natural demand for ADA. People who hold it can use it to buy things and sell things, kind of like what BitPay did for Bitcoin. It brought these things into the mainstream, and Korea is going through that same surge. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's not certainly the only payment partnership that can exist. There's going to be others, but I tend to stay out of those deals. Those are mostly on the Emergo side. So ironically, I tend to hear about them usually right around the same time you do, or a little bit beforehand. So if I really dug, I could probably find out a bit sooner, but I focus so much on the technology and the science, and that's where we need to be at, unless there's business requirements that come in. For example, the Siren Labs partnership, they're going to be putting ADA on their cell phones. They have a cell phone that's coming out in October called the Finny. It's real cool. It's got a little hardware module on the back, so it's kind of like having a ledger plugged into your cell phone.
That's pretty.
And so when you want to spend tokens, you slide it up and you use a fingerprint and a pin to authenticate. It's really nifty. Well, it's going to support ADA. So they, of course, came to us and said, hey, if we're actually going to get this to work on our phone, we need some specific things. And we said, sure, we can build that. So when that happens, I generally know a lot more about the partnership and the deal than when people are just building on top of or listing things like on an exchange that I usually find out at the same time you do.
That's pretty cool. Now, let's get back a little bit to what's going on with Cardano. Do you want to get into a little higher level conversation about Ouroboros and really what's going on there? Obviously, you guys have been working on it a lot, and I know that you just finished up some things and you have some more to come, but I think the community can learn a lot from you, hearing it from you.
Sure. So Ouroboros is a really exciting project because it's a first principles way of trying to build a protocol. So, what a lot of people do is they say, okay, well, I'm trying to solve consensus, so I'll just try to sit down and draw out a protocol and see if it works, and I'll show it to my friends, and if they think it's good, then I'll write it up and deploy it, hope it doesn't have any flaws in it, and there you go. That's how a lot of the protocols in our space were built, and sometimes that works, but often it doesn't work so well. So anyway, we thought like scientists. So what we did is we took a step back and we said, all right, we're going to start from first principles, and we're going to just ask some very simple questions like, what is a blockchain, and under what conditions is it secure, and under what conditions is it not? So we wrote a paper called GKL 15 that basically outlined what that is, and then proof of work is a secure protocol. It can create a secure blockchain. So that was a good first step, because then you have a baseline. Basically say, okay, this is the target. Then there's a question to ask, which is, can proof of stake under any assumptions, not even realistic ones, but any assumptions, even very unrealistic ones, be secure, which is a real hard question. So the first paper in 2016, the very first Ouroboros paper, proved that yes, proof of stake can be secure under theoretical assumptions, but things that wouldn't work in practice. So a synchronized network and all this other stuff that you wouldn't see in a real life network. Then the game was to go from theory to practicality. So what we had to do is, through a series of papers, was gradually build out relaxing requirements so that we could keep the security model we had, but also make it a practical protocol, something that would actually work in a real-life cryptocurrency. So the first major output there was Ouroboros Praus, and basically went from a synchronous to a semi-synchronous model. Its random number generation got 1,000 times faster. A lot of little things that we did to make that protocol real practical. And then finally, Ouroboros Genesis. And what Genesis was all about was this idea of replicating the longest chain rule that Bitcoin has. So Bitcoin has a great property, and so far it's really hard to replicate that proof of stake, which is this idea that if you've never seen the network before, so let's say you're reading the newspaper somewhere, Bitcoin, you say, oh, that's a real good concept. You go to the Bitcoin website, you download the Bitcoin client, and then you click install, and it starts syncing with the network. Well, how do you know that the blockchain that you're retrieving is the right one, or not a malicious one that some node is giving you? Well, what you do is you trust no one, and you weigh the chains. You see which one's the heaviest, which one has the most work. So if you give them a chain and I give them a chain, Bob over there gives them a chain, whichever one of those chains is the heaviest, that is the longest chain. That's what you're going to go with. And that's the version of truth. That's a really good property to have, because you don't need checkpoints, you don't need prior knowledge, and these types of things. So we asked, could we replicate that same setup with proof of stake? And so historically, the answer has been no. You have to have a checkpoint or some heuristic notion of what the chain looks like. But what we did with Ouroboros Genesis is we found a very clever way of basically saying, if you just know the Genesis block, so the initial distribution of the system, then you can actually, when looking at competing chains, assuming a 51% attack hasn't happened, you can know which one is actually correct without being synchronized in the network. And that's a huge step forward. So anyway, the other thing that makes this process special is that each of these papers we write have been peer-reviewed. And I feel I should mention that a bit, because there's somehow, especially from the EOS side, a lot of confusion of what that means. Peer review doesn't mean showing it to your friends or writing a blog post on Steam about something. Peer review means you go to an academic conference or a journal with top scientists on the review committee, you submit it, and you go through a very rigorous discussion where they either reject it outright or they find terrible flaws in your thing and beat you up over it, and you write a rebuttal and you go back and forth and back and forth. And so conferences that we've been accepted to, like Crypto and Eurocrypt, have historically a 10 to 15% acceptance rate. And that's an acceptance rate amongst domain experts, not the general public. So these are papers coming from people from Cornell and Harvard and University of California, Berkeley, and so forth. Okay, so this is a real rigorous thing. It's hard to get a paper into these conferences. And tenure decisions, so whether you get tenure at a university, are decided based upon what conferences your papers have appeared at. So Our papers have appeared in top-tier computer science conferences in cryptography, and every step of the way, from Ouroboros to Ouroboros Praus. Genesis just got accepted to something, although I can't announce the conference quite yet.
Oh, come on.
But that's the difference, I'd say, is that we started from first principles and we kind of walked our way through, and we have a really good mechanistic understanding of all of the problems that proof of stake has. And then we realized there was a lot of broken windows along the way, and we had to fix those broken windows as we kind of came along. Like, for example, if you want to do delegation, hang on a second, what happens when you have cold storage devices like paper wallets or ledgers or these types of things? How do you do delegation there and allow people still to keep their stuff? So we had to create cold delegation. And then we said, well, what if you have exchanges? If you're a proof of stake system and your voting is connected to owning the currency, well, then the exchange can technically control the currency because they tend to hold a lot of it. So we had to create exchange addresses, which are excluded from the decision set. So like little things like that. And that's one of the reasons why it's taken so long, is that nobody rigorously wrote this stuff down. They may have known about it, but they put it to code. And they didn't actually tell anybody, or you'd have to parse the code. And usually their solutions were only partial, meaning that they did their best to patch something, but it's actually not clear if it was secure or if it fully worked. It just seems to work because no one's been able to hack it. But people break things all the time. PGP, for example, has been used for damn near over almost 30 years, and suddenly some guys find a hack in it, which has existed since the beginning. So it's easy to find flaws in systems. It's a lot harder to build systems that don't have flaws, especially if you're not following a very rigorous process. So anyway, we're converging to a final design for the first generation of Ouroboros. So Ouroboros Genesis plus our delegation and incentive scheme that culminates 3 papers. Those 3 things together are what we feel very comfortable is a good first generation POS protocol. The next step is to write a formal specification. We're just about to start that. That usually takes about 1 to 2 months, sometimes 3. And then you can implement very quickly from this formal specification, and you can prove that the implementation is correct. So we're moving real fast towards that, and hopefully by Q1 of 2019 we'll be able to roll all this out and fully decentralize the system. Now, moving beyond that, everybody's talking about sharding. Everybody's talking about high TPS, right? And that's fine. So this is another one of those situations where the theory is not very well understood. So there's a lot of broken windows, there's a lot of assumptions. Everybody's just talking out of their ass about 500,000 transactions per second, these types of things, not really understanding what that actually means. I would say if they're a kilobyte each, that's a 500 megabyte block that you're going to send every second around the entire Earth. Good luck with that, son.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So anyway, we have a whole parallel team that's been doing science for the last 3 months, and they're starting to make really good progress on something called Ouroboros Hydra. Now, Hydra, the Hydra with many heads, is this idea of sharding the Ouroboros protocol. Because we did everything correctly, we have great security proofs. It's a lot easier to actually talk about sharding because you go from a low complexity to a high complexity thing, and a lot of things you need to be true are still true with that. So it simplifies the problem a lot for us. So anyway, we'll publish a paper after we clean up Ouroboros completely, probably Q1, Q2 of next year on Hydra, and then we'll implement that, pull it into our system with some network stack improvements. We should be able to shard everything. So I think we're, despite the fact that we started a little later than everybody else, competing right along with Ethereum and the rest of the game.
Yeah, I had a couple comments on that. When people kind of talk about what's going on with Cardano, why does it seem like they're moving slower? Because here's the thing. There's very fewer and fewer people are here for the tech. A lot of people hear about people becoming millionaires, etc., which is all right. If you're in it for the gains or the trading, that's one thing. But you guys go about with the peer review system, which is what I try to explain. That's why it takes a little longer. You're trying to find all of these flaws, all these patches before you actually send that live into the wildlife with the mass adoption, etc., rather than some other ones who are just get the hype train going, the ICO going, and just putting out whatever code they have. And like, we'll try to figure out the scaling later down the road when we need to. You guys are going what I think is the proper direction, and having this stuff peer reviewed, having this looked at by some of the most brilliant minds across the world, and really trying to create something that is going to be usable as soon as you start pushing that out for mass adoption and to the general public.
Right. I flew from South Korea here to Vietnam, and I was on a 30-year-old plane flying from South Korea to Vietnam. The plane flew just fine. And that tells you that when you build something to last, it will last, even under very harsh conditions. Planes go through hell, man. They go to 40,000 feet. They hit turbulence, get struck by lightning and birds and all these things. Yet somehow they just keep flying usually, and we don't die. You know, and if you build a protocol the same way, you build it to last, it does take a little bit longer, and it is a little bit more expensive, and sometimes it gets slowed down because you discover things that you didn't think of. But at the end of the day, if you build it right, it's going to be around a long time. We all forget the internet, one of the fastest moving things. All these internet startups move fast, great things. They're all built on something that was built in the 1970s. Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn created TCP/IP. They had no idea about Wi-Fi or any of these other things, yet for some reason it all just works. Because the protocol was built in layers, it was built with a lot of wisdom, it was built to be flexible enough to add things in the future. And that's what Cardano is really all about, is taking a step back and saying, let's try to follow engineering practices and let's try to follow design practices in just the right way, so that, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when Charles is dead or retired or fishing or I'm painting somewhere, and I just checked out because crypto's burnt my brain out. You know, some other guy's able to actually take what I've done and build on top of that, and make something useful out of it. So that's the hope. And that said, we're not actually that slow. You know, we're getting faster. Cardano 1.1, the first major update to our system, took about 6 months to get out. Cardano 1.2 only took about 3 months to get out. And then 1.3 is coming out just, I think, 2 weeks from now, first week of August, I believe, or second week of August. I have to look at the release cycle. Cardano 1.4 should come out probably October. So our release cycles are starting to speed up, and the quality and the size of the releases are starting to go up a lot. We're fixing network problems, speeding up the wallet, and so forth. So despite the fact that we're using a really strange programming language, Haskell, and we're using formal methods and other things in the process, we are moving faster and faster because we're getting better at these cycles. And that means we're not going to slow down. So, you know, come 2019, our releases are going to be even faster. We're going to have even more updates. We're going to be able to write code even faster. So it's like everybody keeps thinking that not only are we going to stay in this current state, but we're going to regress and get slower. The reality is we're actually getting out of this current state. We're getting more feature rich. We're getting all these great things, but then we're also able to accelerate the process and add more and more people. The other thing people understand is it's not just IOHK working on Cardano. It's been a nightmare to try to coordinate everybody, but we've gotten better at it. There's allied testing, there's QVIC, there's runtime verification, there's well-type, there's Tweak, there's FP Complete. You know, these are all development companies, very well respected. QVIC, for example, was founded by one of the guys who created the Haskell programming language and invented Quick Check. Yes, John Hughes, he's a pretty solid dude. You know, a lot of these companies led by people with PhDs in computer science. And every one of these companies is doing a different thing. Runtime verification, for example, has got 19 people out of University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and they're building our virtual machine, Yella. We're just about to release the testnet for that July 30th. You know, and that thing was built with the most rigorous formal processes ever. It's the first time ever we're going to see a virtual machine run in a production environment that was built from semantics alone. And it's correct by construction building. It's like you never see that in practice. That's very, very rare. It's like something a computer scientist at some French school does. And he gets his PhD and he says, huzzah, and it goes and works in industry. To actually see that in a product is unheard of for a variety of reasons. So to get all these companies to work together and coordinate this thing has been a project management nightmare. But we've actually built a system now that is very efficient relative to the global nature of the 16 countries that are working on this. And we're starting to see acceleration with that system. So sorry for the delay. Sorry it takes a little bit of time, but I'm pretty happy about what we've been able to accomplish. And the tech stack that we have, I think, is insanely competitive.
That is great. What else do we want to talk about today? Well, I kind of want to talk about something real quick. You kind of mentioned it just recently, you know, a second ago, but also I kind of saw the little Twitter beef you had with Reddit, what's going on. I'm not going to name projects, but I just want to touch base and say that I think a lot of these crypto projects, whether it's a competitor or somebody that's trying to work with interoperability, we need to remember how things kind of used to be and what the purpose of cryptocurrencies and what they really mean for the governance of the world, for the monetary policy of the world, what it could mean. And I just think that, you know, products need, and communities especially, need to stop getting on each other so hard and really be willing to work with each other. Not saying you didn't say anything wrong, but I just kind of see what people post out there and what's going on. It seems like, all right, whatever bag I'm holding, that's the only crypto that can be right, and I'm going to follow them and say whatever. And it's just, I just want people to go back to a couple of years ago where we used to do research, gain knowledge and really try to move things forward in this industry.
Yeah, well, Nick, I will give a caveat there. I get along with a lot of people, even people I disagree with. Like Charlie Lee and I, we always ragging on each other on Twitter, but we have a pretty good relationship, and he's a good guy. And I like the guys from Dash, and I get along with most people, even people I strongly philosophically disagree with. For example, I'm good friends with David Schwartz. He's a good guy from Ripple. And we always rag on each other. And I hate the fact that they hired the guy who created BitLicense and put him on their board. Like, what the hell are you guys doing? It's like a no-go, man. That's like putting Eichmann on a synagogue selection committee. I mean, it's like this is a violation of our foundational principles as a space. But that's Ripple. Okay. The issue I have with certain projects, in particular EOS, was that first one of the founders of it wrote a peer review about us. He called it that, where he just lied. He just straight up lied. He said that we plagiarized DPoS. There is nothing we plagiarized about DPoS. There's no evidence of it. And anybody with a modicum of computer science training can look at how DPoS works and how Ouroboros works and know that they're completely different systems. In fact, the first version of Ouroboros didn't even have delegation in it. How did it work then?
Yeah.
So we stole DPoS, but then apparently if we don't even have delegation in the first version of the system, okay, great. So he just lied about that. And you got to understand the academic community. When you say plagiarism, that is probably the most serious allegation you can levy. I had a professor when I was in university who killed somebody. He hit a student with his car, and they suspended him for a year, but he kept his job. I had another professor who plagiarized. Both of them had tenure. The professor who plagiarized got fired.
Yeah.
So you can kill somebody in the university setting, but you probably keep your job. If you plagiarize, you're out, man. So when you levy that allegation against serious academics from University of Connecticut, ETH Zurich, Rensselaer Polytech Institute, Aarhus University, Tokyo Institute of Technology, University of Edinburgh, you are attacking their careers and you are attacking their personality. And this is not a minor allegation. This is a very, very serious allegation. And then he just allowed his community to stoke those fires and allowed people to just keep repeating and saying it. Another thing is what Dan has done with DPoS is not innovative at all. It's been known how to do since the 1980s. So you have fixed quorum protocols, BFT protocols. Usually you just pick them. You say these 21 people are going to run something. You say, oh, I need to make it dynamic. Okay, add a voting system to it. And so we can vote people, and once they hit a threshold, then they're there. That's like a minor modification to theory that's 30 years old. That's what Dan has done. Now, it's fast, it works, it's not actually insecure, it's a pretty good idea. But he acts as if he invented all of this. Well, here's why. He's not probably aware of the theory that's existed in the 1980s or 90s because he never actually studied graduate level computer science. He has a bachelor's degree from Virginia Tech. So his training ended with reading a distributed systems book by some guy like Christian Cashin or Nancy Lynch. It's a senior level class. And everything else was self-taught, just like Vitalik is self-taught. And that's great if you're real smart, you can do things, but then you miss a lot. Mm-hmm. One of the brightest people I've ever met in my life is Terry Tao. And Terry got a PhD in math at 21 from Princeton and got the Fields Medal, which is the Nobel Prize in Mathematics, at 28. Guy's just off the charts brilliant, okay? He still got a PhD, and he still had to spend 10 years training to be able to make real, meaningful, positive contributions to the field of mathematics. And he's a child prodigy, graduated from high school at 12 years old, okay? So just because you're brilliant doesn't excuse the fact that you need knowledge and you need training and wisdom. So you have to surround yourself by good people. You have to surround yourself by good processes. Ouroboros has been touched by collectively scientists that probably published 1,000 papers and have decades of experience. And they're from all across the world, trained in Asia, trained in Europe, trained in North America at some of the best universities, and worked with some of the best cryptographers who have literally constructed the entire space. And we have used very rigorous models from global universal reproducibility to standard cryptographic models that you'd expect with provable security and so forth to win a lot of very small battles, which don't seem very important to engineers. And for the most part, they're not important to engineers, but are necessary to know if what we're actually doing is going to last 30, 40 years. Yeah. Then what was most insulting about that peer review was that Dan said, oh, all the proofs in their paper just validate the things that I'm saying. That's, again, to a domain expert, is obvious that he's just shit is spewing out of the guy's mouth because he has no idea what the hell he's talking about. No, none of our proofs actually validate anything that Dan is saying. You know, the Tendermint proofs actually probably more validate what Dan is saying than what our paper has. So if that was just it, okay. But then here's what happened. His community picked up the peer review, and they just started viciously attacking us over Reddit, viciously attacking us over Twitter, calling us clone coin. Then they started going after me personally. They kept bombarding me on Twitter and Reddit saying, prove what you did at Ethereum. Why did Dan fire you? Why did Vitalik fire you? They got very deeply personal with everything that they said. You know, and I said, guys, even if you hate me and I'm totally incompetent, there's 160 people at IOHK, and that's just IOHK. Then there's runtime verifications run by a guy who worked at NASA, and he does contract work with Boeing. He ran a DARPA project. You know, he's a tenured professor at a major research university. And we have for our programming language design, the guy who created Haskell, Phil Wadler, he works for us. I mean, it's like there's so many other people here on this project. But no. The strategy is just make Charles look like the world's greatest monster. Then they go after my Twitter and they show pictures of me posting food posts on my personal Twitter. And they did this montage where they have all the pictures together of me eating and on a horse or something. And then Dan and a monitor say, who would you rather running your project? So they got deeply, deeply personal. They first accused scientists of plagiarism. Then they just lied about our ecosystem. They tarnished the reputation of great people. And then they personally attacked me. Yeah. Now, why would you do this? Well, you do this if maybe you're not so confident in your investment. Maybe you're not so confident in your technology. You know, the other thing is in terms of return, he raised $4 billion, the ecosystem's sitting at 7. Cardano's ICO was 62 million. We're sitting at 4.5. You know, I'm probably a better horse to ride on there, Dan. You know, so you know, everything about these guys is just unbelievable to me, and it's all about the money with them. Any person with a straight face to say, give me $4 billion and that's a donation and I owe you nothing and I have no fiduciary obligations and I can just go to Monaco and gamble with it, legally you can't do anything about me, is unbelievable. The money that was donated to Cardano Foundation is into a regulated entity. Cardano Foundation, by Swiss law, has to execute on its mandated mission. And if the people who run the foundation don't do that, it's not like they get fired. They go to jail for embezzlement.
Yeah. Okay,
that's a very serious standard. Money for Blockchain just sitting in Cayman Islands. Where's the legal recourse if they misappropriate funds? So you know, that particular project is just astounding to me. And my issue is it's existential. So it's not like, well, if EOS fails, who cares? If a $4 billion project, a lot of U.S. money, U.S. participation, fails, the regulators will get involved. The SEC, the DOJ, FinCEN, CFTC. And you know what will happen is they won't just get involved and be very surgical with a scalpel and hit EOS. They'll get involved and hit the entire space.
Yeah.
They'll sculpt the regulation for the entire space. It just makes my life more difficult. It makes your life more difficult. Anybody who does anything in crypto will now have to probably get special licenses or, you know, apply for something or be under intense scrutiny or even soft discrimination where suddenly it's more difficult to get a bank account. Suddenly it's more difficult to sell your cryptocurrencies or you have to fill out extra forms to sell your cryptocurrencies or something like that. That's what happens when you have a failure. Like when Enron failed, it passed Sarbanes-Oxley. And every single publicly traded company went under an enormous amount of extra scrutiny, had to hire tons of extra people. After they passed Sarbanes-Oxley, every Fortune 500 company, U.S. presidents, revised their books. Every single one, not one. Because the CEO had to sign it along with the CFO. And the CEO's like, ooh, I don't want to go to jail for this, so let's make sure everything's good. And the auditors made a lot of money, the lawyers made a lot of money, the accountants made a lot of money. Didn't actually make businesses any safer. We still had 2008. And the exact same thing happens when you have these massive greed-induced failures in the system. So I see the moral foundations, I see the processes they're following, I see the claims that they're making, and it just deeply disturbs and bothers me. I think the space needs to grow up a little bit. So I agree with you about civility. We have so much more in common. We're like real small compared to everybody else, yet we're all squabbling and picking on each other and beating each other up. This is why I say things like formal methods and peer review, because formal methods, you get mathematical proofs that you're right. You can't debate that. We believe in code, we believe math is law, so okay, great. And in case of peer review, it's not a person. In fact, it's double blind, the peer review process. When you submit your paper, you submit it without the authors on the paper. And the people reviewing the paper, you don't know who's on the review committee, which people look. Now you can guess because the committees aren't so large, but you still don't know who is actually looking at the paper. So it's a double-blind process. So there's no ego here. There's no personality here. This is all about, is it right? Right? And that's a process. And if Charles Hoskinson was to die, if I was to go away, that process continues. Just like when Satoshi went away, Bitcoin continued, right? So we should follow that process if we intend on building out the science and building out the engineering of the space. And I don't see that process being followed with some project. I think it's just all cult of personality, and this lone samurai on the hilltop is just going to deliver us to the promised land, and we should have faith in him and trust that person. That's the complete opposite of what Satoshi told us to do.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the points there. And I mean, just to reiterate, plagiarism is one of the harshest offenses that you can accuse anyone of. People at the university I went to, if you plagiarized even a one-page paper, you would get threatened for expulsion even after you paid your part. So I mean, you can't do that. And then number two, people saying, why did Vitalik, fire you? I would probably argue that, hey, you kind of probably split based on that, and you took all this time for Ethereum Classic because you truly believe in decentralization and immutability, which Ethereum.
And no one paid me. No one paid me for Ethereum Classic, by the way, and I didn't take my Ether with Ethereum. So my whole Ethereum experience has been a flat. I haven't made anything. Got the brand, okay, I guess that's worth something, but a lot of people don't like me, so there you go. It's a mixed bag. And as for Ethereum Classic, it's like no one paid me. I didn't make anything. I put over $1 million of my own money to building this client out of principles. So you got to stand by your principles, so man, and you got to stand by what you believe in. And you get criticized all the time. That's fine. People criticize. It's like USC. The people are always talking shit before the fight, and they're in each other's faces, and they're real tough, right? Or Floyd Mayweather and what's his name, McGregor. God, that was fun, man. McGregor had a heart on and everything in that fight, man. That was great. And then afterwards, they're hugging each other and everything because they're like, hey, we just made $100 million. Okay. Who cares? So, that's okay. You can do that. But when you start going after people's careers, when you start personally harming people, or, you really try to discredit people or get them fired or something like that, that goes beyond just shooting the shit, and that goes into something very serious. And that we can't have that in this space. There's no way we can succeed if we're just going to eat each other alive. The other thing is you have to think about how to be better than where we came from. Just because you legally can do something doesn't make it right. I mean, that's where Wall Street was at. Goldman Sachs and all these other guys were just selling junk to investors, and they're sending emails to each other saying, I just dumped this stuff, look at my commission. And none of those guys went to jail because the law was structured in a way that let them get away with it. Didn't make it right. You're scum. And similarly, just because you can go raise several $1 billion, you don't need several $1 billion. They say, but we need the money to build up the ecosystem. I say, okay, let's take a step back. Steve Jobs went to John Doerr and said, and John Doerr is the best venture capitalist in the world, done 192 IPOs. He invested in Google and Intel, runs Kleiner Perkins. This guy walks on water, man. He is amazing. Goes to John Doerr and says, hey, I'm building the iPhone, and I need a venture fund for cell phone applications. This is Steve Jobs, the best entrepreneur of the modern era, and John Doerr, the best VC of the modern era. They started, I think, $100 million fund to build out the iPhone ecosystem. Okay, you can't tell me that or any of these other guys are bigger than the iPhone, for God's sakes. I mean, you're delusional if you think that. So the best of the best need $100 million to do this, whereas these guys apparently think $4 billion is the way to go. How would you spend that money?
Yeah.
I was like, it doesn't make you execute any faster. It doesn't make your product any better. It just makes your salaries go better. You lose all salary negotiation ability. Because somebody who's applying to work for you says, I want $1 million. You say, no, sorry, we can't afford it. You say, I know you have $4 billion.
Yeah.
You have to pay me. Like I'll just go work for somebody else. I want $1 million. It's like if you come and you have less money, you say, no, well, we don't have a lot. We have to be very conservative. We have to sacrifice and so forth. And it just becomes more of a game of how do I get that money as opposed to a game of how do we go and execute it. We saw the same thing with the overvaluation of the dot-com era. These pets.coms guys raising a few $100 million. And like everybody comes in, I want my stock options, I want a higher salary, I want this, I want that. It was real tough. So I think the space needs to be more relaxed and say, if it doesn't cost $4 billion, don't give them $4 billion, give them what they need. And then give them a windfall on the back end. Let's say a few years down the road, if the token's wildly successful, make them billionaires. By the way, that's how Ethereum worked for Vitalik. $18 million, not a lot of money relative to what we've been seeing.
Yeah.
$50 billion capitalization. Everybody who touched that early is a millionaire. Some of them have hundreds of millions to billions of dollars as a consequence of touching that early. But that's a reward for delivering and building something and making other people rich. Same for Microsoft. Even the janitors, if they were in early enough, they became millionaires. Everybody got crazy rich because they took over the whole IT world. They created Windows and all these other great products, and they made windfall profits from it. But they didn't get paid up front. Could you imagine 1976 Bill Gates getting $4 billion saying, here you go build the software industry? 19-year-old Bill Gates, he wouldn't know what the hell to do with that. So, I think there needs to be a return to rationalization here. And this whole argument, well, the free market gave us the money, so therefore that's what it's worth. Like, no. Ponzi schemes have this happen too. People put money in, getting a token with the anticipation that they can sell the token at a higher value than what they bought it for to the next idiot. Yeah. That in no way is a bit of confidence in the project's quality. When a VC puts money into something, they're illiquid. They have to hold on to that investment, sometimes years, maybe even a decade before they see a return on that. So they're vested as hell. And if there's any problems at all, they're getting involved and they're trying to figure out, how do we solve this? Oh, one of the co-founders got domestic violence issue. One of the co-founders, got shot. One of the co-founders has an alcohol problem. We got to get this guy to AA, because they know that their fortune is connected to that, and that guy has to succeed for them to succeed. When you get a token up front, you can sell it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So if you're betting strategically that because everybody's hyper speculative and irrational, that when you get this, you can go and sell it tomorrow for a higher value than what you pay for it today, are you really giving faith and confidence into that project? No, you're giving faith and confidence in an irrational market. We saw that happen during the dot-com boom. You had all these retail investors day trading on their spare time at coffee shops, and they were buying stocks for things that had no product. They had no business plan. Entrepreneurs were very young, and PE was just terrible, like 400 to 1, 2,000 to 1. It was ridiculous. And why were they buying the stock? Everything was going up, and they said, I can buy this and sell this. In fact, if you were to survey, I think they did this in the late 90s when people were talking about the potential of a collapse. They went to coffee shops, talked to retail traders, retail investors, and they asked them, hey, what's in your portfolio? And they'd show the stocks that they'd bought, and they say, what does that company do? And the person, on average, would not even know what the company did, what the product was or anything like that. And they asked, well, why'd you buy it? He said, I like the name, or something like that. And they say, well, it's all tech stuff, and I'll be able to sell it. And that's a lot of people are doing that right now. They hear some stuff. They hear some vanity metrics like 500,000 transactions per second. They see the marketing, and they say, oh, these guys are great at marketing, man. Everybody's going to want to buy this. So they buy the token. Token goes up. They sell the token. They exit. They have their profit. Yay. But at the end of the day, musical chairs stops. And there's somebody who's not sitting down. And it's the same deal here. So when it stops and the markets start going down or an issue happens, what happens to the people that are left with the tokens? They lose everything. Goes down 90%, goes down 95%. It just collapses. And there's nothing there to pick them up and keep them going on. Oh, and by the way, all the people behind the product have already been paid up front and have no fiduciary obligation to be around and take you to the next level.
That's what I was going to say. Like, it's really, when you raise that much money, even, we don't talk too much about ICOs on the channel and live because it's really hard for me to do my fundamental due diligence because there's not really GitHub repositories and things for me to dig into. But I always say, you got to be looking for ones who are looking to at least have a hard cap, a lower hard cap, not just, oh, we'll raise as much as you're willing to give us, because then you kind of lose that motivational get-go to, hey, in order for me to succeed, I need to make a product and make it work because, hey, I was only raised $1 million or $2 million. Now with $4 billion, it's like, it's not working out so much, but hey, I've already earned my block producer rewards and we're kind of on our way, so we'll move on to the next project. I'm not saying that's going to happen, guys. I'm just saying that's a possibility with when you get this kind of money up front.
Right. Yeah. So, it is what it is, and that's okay. I'm just warning everybody that this type of behavior is not going to result in a good outcome. And human beings were real good at patterns, and we've done this before in the 90s, and we're doing it again. And we saw where that ended up. Doesn't mean the space is invalid. Like on the back of the dot-com crisis, Amazon and Google and Facebook and others came out of it. So we're going to have a lot of real good projects that come out of this. But we cannot go ahead and just say, just because we're going to get a Facebook and an Amazon and a Google out of this movement, to believe that everybody's going to be a Facebook, Amazon, and Google, or to sacrifice basic business principles.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have proper incentives. You have to have rights when you put money into things. You have to make sure consumer fraud doesn't happen. And you have to have checks and balances. Like when we write code, we have an external auditor, FP Complete. They're real annoying. But, you know, we still have to deal with them because they're an auditor. You know, that's what they're there for. They're there to be annoying. They're there to ask the tough questions or to really drill down at things. We have a security auditor, Kadelsky Security. We released a report for our Ethereum Classic client, Mantis. And yeah, they found problems in it. We had to go and resolve those problems and so forth. And then on the science side, we go through peer review, which is really annoying because you have this guy, you don't know who the hell the guy is, but he's this guy who just won't let something go. Just keeps asking and asking. You're like, okay, well, we got to make this guy happy, right? You know, and it's a lot of work, and it's real tough to get through these gatekeepers, and it slows you down a bit. But at the end of the day, it gives people a level of objectivity and understanding whether what I'm saying is true. It's no longer trust Charles, it's trust the process. That's how we build rockets. That's how we do medical science. That's how we do physics. And for the most part, it's worked out pretty well. Some people get their cancer cured. Some people get to go to the moon. Eventually, somebody's going to get to go to Mars because of these processes. If we didn't follow them, we had that. It was the Soviet space program. Didn't work out so well.
And going back to with like how you said, out of the dot-com era, we did have the Apples, the Googles, the Facebooks. We preach that all the time too. Really, it's only a matter of time. I think you might have one more market cycle where the tide raises all boats, and you know all these microcap coins and 1,500 cryptocurrencies see the gains there. But eventually, you know, after the institutional infrastructure is built, it's going to be relying on actual products, actual usable products that are going to be used on a mass adoption level. And everything else is going to, unfortunately, go to zero probably. That's just how it works in this. And I know a lot of people in crypto are a little younger and they didn't really live through the dot-com era or didn't do the research on it. So we try to protect them because they are, they're retail investors, blue-collar workers, whatever it may be. And we just got to say, hey, do some research and get into projects you really believe in. They might not go up 50% one day, or you might not be able to ride a pump and dump. But if you're in this for the long term and for the tech, the fundamentally strong projects are the one that you want to participate in because those will be the winners in the long run. You don't have to worry about day trading or if it's going to go down 90% the next day because the CEO did an exit scam or whatever, you know, so. Well, I guess really the last topic I wanted to touch is I see that you have more and more partnerships and you're kind of on the board of advisors, you know, with Storm and ZenCash and others. My question is, how does that benefit those coins? Obviously, you're involved with those, but will that eventually also benefit Cardano and ADA? You know, are you going to try to have interoperability there? Are you going to try to maybe learn with the governance you were trying to implement on Zen and then implement that back into the Cardano ecosystem, or what's going on there?
Right. Yeah. So occasionally I serve as an advisor for projects. Almost always it's post-ICO. If you serve pre-ICO, you're there to help them raise the money. Yeah. So they don't really care if you actually give advice or not. They want your face on the website because that adds money, right? So I don't like that. That's not fun. But if you're there post-ICO, they already have the money. So it's like, you know, you already have the body on the carpet. The only question is, what do you do with it, right? Yeah. So you're like the wolf in Pulp Fiction. So anyway, I usually come in post start, and I give them strategic advice about everything from technology to community building to regulatory questions and so forth. And I seldom do it. I'm actually not an advisor for a lot of projects. Some people are professional advisors and they're real good at it, but usually I only join a project when I see something that's pretty interesting there. Like I wanted to do something in the privacy space, and ZenCash was pretty cool. I like Rob and Rolf and the rest of the team. They're nice people. They're easy to work with. And it's fun to go to South Carolina and drink whiskey on the porch.
That's what I did an interview with him and he was telling me, he's like, oh yeah, Charles is probably going to come over. I'll put a birdie in his ear, maybe talk about an interview, etc. You know, I like Rob a lot too. And I've started to really like ZenCash and what they got going on. Cause they're not just trying to be a peer-to-peer digital currency, but they're really building like a 3 or 4 pillar structure of usability.
Right. And it's a good opportunity for us to work through some problems. Like, for example, they had a 51% attack, and that was real interesting. You always hear about it, but you never see it. But we saw it, so that was interesting. So then also we get to talk about treasury systems and side chains, and ZenCash is a really receptive client to innovate because they have to be able to differentiate themselves in the marketplace. In terms of Storm, Simon, this is the guy, when he was in college, he said, I'm going to set up some food stands. And by the time he graduated, he basically had a monopoly around the whole university. That kid's best salesman, hardest worker I've ever seen. And he's real bright. He's got a great handle of both the Korean market and U.S. market. And he's a true entrepreneur. And the thing about Storm is that they're actually trying to build a consumer product. They're actually trying to figure out a way, how do we generate revenue? How do we actually get adoption? How do we get a lot of users? So it's always nice to be in that kind of environment because it tends to focus you a little bit more and start thinking more about, less about the technology and more about the consumer experience. And that's usually where you need to start, is how is this actually going to get adopted and change people's lives? Then you work your way back to what the engineering and the science needs to look like, instead of starting from the science and working to the consumer experience, which is the temptation when you're an engineer. So that's why I work with Storm. And then there's ZenCash, and then there's Ethereum Classic. And I think those are the only three I'm currently an advisor for at the moment. Generally I just, whatever they want to call me, they call me and we talk, and I see them at conferences and we usually have dinner, and they ask me a lot of problems. So it's almost like a board of directors style role. We meet too often, but when you do meet, it's about big strategy things or potential partnerships or these types of things, and informal performance reviews and these types of things. And say, hey, you guys are making a mistake, cut it out.
Yeah.
I'm the old fat guy that you paid to tell you that, so I can say it.
Do you think in the future that those will either directly or indirectly benefit either Cardano or ADA?
Oh yeah, that's the second part of your question. So it's important to understand that IOHK is a blockchain agnostic. We're actually a research and development company, so we have science division, engineering division, and we build cryptocurrencies. So we're not just the Cardano company. We actually have some unannounced projects that we're working on at the moment. And we'll be launching more coins. And so that's why it's important to have things like Emergo and Cardano Foundation, because those people get up every single day and it's ADA. I get up every single day and I say, how do I make the technology of ADA the best in the world and make it work with as many things as possible? But it's not my job to see the ADA token appreciate to $1 trillion or something like that. That's what the foundation and Emergo are trying to accomplish. Because at the end of the day, not everything can be solved with one ecosystem. If you're going to do IoT or a social network or a privacy coin, these all require different primitives than if you're trying to build a financial stack for the emerging world. That's what Cardano is trying to do. So you need to actually have multiple tokens and multiple horses. While some people in my company do wake up and work real hard to try to make Cardano great, it's not our primary focus in every division of the company. We have other affairs. So what I do look for these partnerships, though, is how do we benefit the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem? Good governance, good practices, good science is ubiquitously good for everybody. If we adopt them, it means that there's a less probability the projects will fail, less probability that we're going to have long-term issues or problems with our system. So any players that I advise, I try to take a lot of our business processes that we've developed at IOHK and ideas we've developed at Cardano and give them to those cryptocurrencies to implement. So I think that ultimately make it the space better. And of course, we're going to always push for putting in side chains into those things so that we can talk to those currencies. And in some cases, because of how agile these coins are, they may actually end up getting features before Cardano does because it's much easier to put them into that particular ecosystem. That's real nice. We tend to learn from each other as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of cross-pollination, and there's definitely a lot of room for innovation and so forth. There's a lot of mutual benefit.
That's really interesting to finally get that perspective and hear it from you. I've kind of always wondered that. The community kind of always asked that, and I didn't know what answer to give that to them. So that's really nice to see. So I know you're probably busy, and we're going to let you get going. But before we get out of here, is there any last thoughts that you want to talk to about with ADA or with Cardano? Because that's the primary reason people have been pushing me to try to get an interview with you, is about this project in particular. Is there anything that really excites you moving forward, or anything that you want to reiterate to potential users, investors, speculators, everybody who's looking at the ADA token and the Cardano platform?
Well, a lot of good stuff is coming out. So the yellow testnet's coming out at the end of July. There's a new product that people are going to be super excited about. Can't yet announce it. Coming out August 15th for beta. There's Prometheus coming out in September, which is our Rust version of Cardano, which is going to be really useful for embeddable devices, ATMs, mobile clients. In fact, we were actually able to get Prometheus to run on an Android device and an Apple phone. So it's pretty exciting for people who want to build mobile wallets. I think that's a great code base to use to do that. Then come October, we probably will see Cardano 1.4. And boy, that's going to be a huge update.
Yeah.
It's going to be very prominent, and I'm really excited about it. So, like every month, for the next few months, we're going to be getting a bag of goodies, and that's nice to have. Somewhere along the way, in the next few months, we'll also see ledger support being pulled into our system, so that's going to be real nice. And then the Shelley-related stuff is going to start trickling out pretty quickly, and we're actually launching a bunch of test nets too, like Byron testnet's coming out in the next few weeks. So if you want to play on a testnet instead of the mainnet, you can do that. That's exciting. And the Shelley testnet should come out before the end of the year. So that's going to be exciting too. So, just look for these things come. They're going to become more frequent. They're going to become more meaningful. And we're getting to the point where we're starting to build on Granite. And we're starting to solidify a lot of things. Like, we're pretty happy with the V1 APIs. We'll probably do a few more extensions to them. For the most part, those are solidified. We understand them. I'm pretty happy with our wallet architecture. We're getting pretty happy with how consensus works and so forth, which means that we get to the exciting stuff like side chains and smart contracts and these types of things. And that's going to be an endless river. There's a lot of things to do there. So just play around with our stuff and let us know how good we did it. Tell us what we did wrong.
There you go. That's what it's all about. It sounds like you have a pretty exciting future moving forward, especially, like I said, every single month something's going to be coming out. It looks like the crypto market as a whole might be turning around here, so those kind of news events for ADA and Cardano might be more meaningful or might stick in the memory of more individuals since people are starting to trickle back, trying to get their knowledge on the space, etc. And I'm really excited for the institutional infrastructure that's starting to build up, and we're going to start having more quote-unquote smart money, if that's what you want to call them, starting to learn a little bit about cryptocurrencies, blockchain technology. And I'm just, I've been here for a while, and I'm excited that it's starting to be used more and more in everyday life. And I'm excited for 2-3 years out from here, where hopefully ADA and Cardano are still standing, still going strong, and used in our everyday lives. In the background, maybe we don't even know what's going on with it.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for the time. And guys, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And until next time, stay tuned right here at Learn Crypto for your daily cryptocurrency updates.